All right. Welcome to Living in the Past, where two middle-aged dudes relive the past by enjoying the pop culture of their youth. Last episode, we were dealing with a film that I absolutely despised and still despise, Forrest Gump. This episode, though, total 180. We're doing a film that I adore, that I think is probably one of the best 2 or 3 films of 1994, and that is the Frank Darabont film, The Shawshank Redemption.
Wait, hold up. Isn't Forrest Gump a film that was released in 1994?
It was. It's absolutely despised. And it won Best Picture, which was a big conversation on the last episode with Devin.
It won 6.
What?
It won 6.
I know.
And Shawshank was over 7.
I know. It's an awful feeling.
Yeah,
Awful.
so it's a travesty.
It's an awful feeling. So I couldn't escape from prison without my good buddy Jeff, our resident Stephen King fan, expert.
Fanatic.
Jeff, thanks for coming on the show, man. I'm excited to talk about this film.
Same. And thanks for having me. This is awesome. I love hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Look, this is a Stephen King novella, which was originally called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. It is directed by Frank Darabont. He also wrote the adapted screenplay for this film. One of the first gifts my wife ever gave me before we were married, it was just a birthday gift. It was the script to Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, I totally forgot about it because in all of the moves we had done, it just got lost.
Yeah.
And and she's like, "Do you remember?" I'm like, "Remember what?" She's like, "I got you the Shawshank." I'm like, "That's right." I love the script. I need to buy it again. It's a great read just on its own. It's, of course, the novella is amazing as well. There's so much to talk about. I mean, this film came out in 94. It didn't make a ton of money at all. It was almost kind of an afterthought. It came out in the fall, and it was on my radar. I went and saw it, but I remember it was. I don't even think it was number 1 at the box office any of its weekends that it was out. Like it just kind of came and went and disappeared, but then got nominated and sort of got a second life on cable TV and just sort of kept churning along, and then it just kind of everyone fell in love with this film almost after the fact. When was the first time you saw it?
I came back to the United States. I got back in like late June of 94. And then we used to go over the hill to Grants Pass. There was one screen theater in the town that I grew up in. So we'd go over the hill, and there was this multiplex that had 15 screens in White City.
Oh, wow.
And you could pay for one movie and then just hang out there all day and keep sneaking into other ones.
Yes.
So this was like third on the list one day. And we ended up watching it 2 times in a row because it was so
serious?
good. Oh, yeah, no.
Oh,
there's 4 of us who snuck in. And we sat there and had that argument as young, 19, 20-somethings. We got to see this again.
Yeah.
It was just the best thing.
Yeah, I remember walking out way more emotional than I anticipated.
Yeah.
And I didn't, when you're 20, I think I was 20 when this came out. And I remember I didn't understand why I was feeling the way I felt. I felt like I'd been on this odyssey, this journey with Andy Dufresne.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had accomplished something with him. It was rare that movies can do that. And I felt that way walking out, that I had been on a journey with this character. And I sometimes think when movies are able to do that, that's sort of the magic of cinema.
Yeah.
When they're able to kind of transport you.
I also think when it comes to categorizing it as far as I am down for any movie that moves me.
Right.
That movies that move you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when I think of movies that fit this category, Silence of the Lambs is one of them. Another one is Seven.
Mm-hmm.
Where you don't necessarily feel that same emotion walking out, but you have been moved mightily, and you're just like, wow, something happened here. This is one of them, definitely.
And it's all around, like the 90s films are really interesting because there's many that do that.
Yeah.
So King was inspired by, when he wrote this novella, like from a bunch of different places. I mean, there's sort of a subgenre of film that's the prison movie,
Yeah.
And this came out in '94, but you had, Escape from Alcatraz with Eastwood. You could even kind of throw Cool Hand Luke in that kind of genre. There's several films that kind of fit the, we're in prison, we're trying to get out, we're trying to escape, or just trying to survive. So King drew that that inspiration from just prison stories and films about institutional life. This is in a 82, I think I'm right, 82 collection called Different Seasons. And listen to this. It's crazy because it has Apt Pupil in it, which was made by Bryan Singer in the 90s as well. It's okay. I mean, it has some really good moments, but Apt Pupil tells a story of a really gifted high school student that basically discovers this old guy living nearby as a Nazi war criminal. And so that's Apt Pupil. Then there's The Body, which is Stand By Me, which we've done on this podcast. It is a favorite. Stand By Me is incredible. That film came out in '86, so 8 years prior, that movie came out. And then there's a story called The Breathing Method, which I'm not familiar with at all. I haven't read this collection. I've been back when we had bookstores. I would go thumb through it and read sections of the stories I was familiar with because of the cinema, but I never did have you read this whole?
Yeah.
So what's
it's incredible to look at a lot of King's shorter work.
Yeah.
But I think that of this, when this selection came out, everybody was, of course, really into his horror genre.
Right.
He was in his horror era, and when this came out, this was a step away from that supernatural for his writing, and so that at least two of them, like you said, Apt Pupil was fair to middling at best, but The Body, being translated into Stand By Me, and then you'd think that'd be hard to top, and then this comes out, but I mean, again, that's not King necessarily. That kind of lends to, his impact as a writer and his ability to write story. But we can talk about that in a minute.
Well, King's interesting. I was doing some research, and as of this recording, I think we're close to 90 films of his work being adapted. That's I mean, I guess you would double up Carrie has been made twice,
Oh, it counts.
There is what's one of the crazy things is, and I think I mentioned this when we did The Shining, is that Salem's Lot is in the can. There is a new iteration of Salem's Lot. The film is done. It isn't supposed to be a bad movie. It's that there's some sort of rights thing going on with Warner Brothers, and the film is done. People that have seen it say it's good. It is set in the time period of the book, so in the 1970s. It's supposed to be scary, which the book is, and it's just sitting there on the shelf. So, I mean, we would even have another one if, if it would just get released, and I have no idea. It's just sitting there. It is a finished, completed film, and it's been on the shelf for many years now.
Yeah, well, you can't get away from the Stephen King effect.
Yeah,
and at least in American culture,
right.
I think there's a couple of things that make him spectacular, and the throwaway, the one that everyone brings up, is his ability. He's just immersive, descriptive prose,
right,
and readable though, and that's where he gets this pulp label, which I don't think is.
Right.
I don't think it's valid. But again, you get into that argument of arguing for literature in its own time. It's just kind of that want thing.
Yeah.
Where how can you do it?
Right.
Where the contemporaries of Dickens saying he was this incredible writer. No, he was probably considered somewhat pulp of his time.
Yeah, King is. I like how you put it. His descriptions, when I was a younger reader, I would skip them to get to dialogue. I was always more drawn to the dialogue. I think a lot of readers are. But King was a gateway to slow down for me.
Oh, good.
And the first book I read was Pet Sematary, and I was in 8th grade, and it melted my brain. It was so
arguably one of his best books.
It was so terrifying. I have not gone back to it, but it is left an imprint on me. And the movie's not bad either. Like
No.
the movie's fine.
But I think you're jumping past that immersive, descriptive,
Right.
and you're jumping into what I think is the real reason that King is such an impact, and that is his ability to write relationships.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
his books are very accessible when we think about our lives, that whole Joseph Campbell idea of our life as narrative. And I think that people are looking, sorry, I'm going to go a little bit sideways,
Go.
but people aren't looking as much for meaning as they are for the feeling of being alive. And that's kind of
Right.
that's a paraphrase of, Campbell's big idea around storytelling. But Stephen King, no matter what he's writing, has a way of, I think, number one, writing those relationships in such a way that we have access to them and we can make parallels in our lives. And then they struggle, and in result, whether they live or die, is you come away going, I'm so glad I'm not there.
Right.
My life is so, precious,
Yeah,
if not
yeah,
good.
yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what it is for me, and I'm gonna not do a good job because it's hard for me to put this into words. I think you're right. The relationships, the characters are some of the more alive characters I've ever interacted with in books. The last 3 Stephen King books I've read are, I think it's called Joyland, which is a hard case crime book. It's like about a 200-page book.
Yeah.
I was surprised how good that was. It was really good. And I totally related to the protagonist. Love that. Highly recommend. And then I read Salem's Lot, and then I read The Dead Zone. So I read those 3, and all of them left me feeling a little melancholy, but I did feel like there was truth in it, which is bizarre, like vampires and like a guy that can like kind of tell the future, and yet I felt like I connected with all those characters, and I felt their sadness and their journey. And I think all of us have moments where there's sadness, and that doesn't mean, I'm not saying his stories are without hope, because I think there is hope in some of his stories, but there is this accessibility with his characters, and I think that translates to the Shawshank Redemption on film too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we can talk about that when we talk about the film.
Yeah.
I think that this may be, there's one or two, but I think this may be one of the few, iterations of a novel that has been translated to film that I think the film might even be better than the original novella in this case.
Yeah, I've had some acquaintances, friends say that.
Yeah.
Like say, I've read it and I've seen it and I like the movie better.
Well, I'm kind of a snob when it comes to this kind of stuff, and this is one of the few where I'm like, and I don't think it was just the script. I think it was multivariable. I think how they cast this was incredible.
It's amazing.
Across the board.
It's amazing casting. Yeah, it's crazy.
To bounce back to what you were saying about the characters, in one of my favorite philosophers, I guess, kind of philosophers, C.S. Lewis, when he's talking about the love of friendship, he talks about how when the parts being greater than the sum.
Right.
I think that that's something that you can see in King's writing. His characters are amazing; they're well developed, but the way that he has them engage with each other, like you said, it's vampires. It's a little boy.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of kids going into a sewer. It's some guys in jail. But the way that he writes their overlap, that Venn diagram of their lives, is just, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that he's able to do this repeatedly in his stories.
Yeah.
It's incredible, frankly, that he's, because I like someone, like, if we want to just talk writers, like I love Dean Koontz, but he doesn't have the volume really of King. I don't think.
Well, and his characters are more one-dimensional in my estimation.
Yeah.
Card does a pretty good job, Orson Scott Card does a pretty good job of the character development, but then he can't build the world that King can build.
Yeah.
So you have these other authors who have pieces, I think, of him. But it's, again, my lit friends get bent out of shape when I call him the Samuel Clemens of our time, but I really do believe that. I believe
it's going to be so interesting, and we won't be around, but in like 100 years, how people are going to reflect on him, because his imprint on our culture is undeniable at this point. It's undeniable.
There is one thing that is kind of less highbrow that we haven't talked about about King.
Okay.
There's this effect, I think, that's part of the Stephen King effect. It's that when you're driving down the road and there's a car wreck and you can't stop looking, or what's the quote Longworth said? I've got it written down here. Here it is. If you haven't got anything nice to say about anybody, come sit next to me. I think there's this whole thing where he makes a beautiful mess in his writing that you just can't look away from. And as soon as you think, oh, this can't get any worse, something bigger happens that's even worse.
Yes.
And there's a way out, whether it's good or bad, but you can't look away.
You can't. And he taps into fear in really unique ways, whether it is a cosmic clown in a sewer or being wrongfully accused of murder and going to prison for life. You know, I mean, it's like that. He just taps into it. And the setup for the movie is, all right, this is a classic, right? I mean, I think we can safely say this is a classic. It's a classic of the 90s. I think it's what's interesting is like people vote for film on IMDb. It's, I think, still the #1 film. It might have lost that position.
It has been for a long time. If it's not there now, it's in the top 10.
Yeah, it's a top 10 film on IMDb. You know, tens of thousands of people have voted it as, you know, a highly rated movie. Frank Darabont, this is it's kind of crazy because this is his directorial debut. Darabont wrote. He was a screenwriter. He was involved with absolutely one of my favorite horror movies of the late 80s. It's called The Blob. It's a remake of the 50s version. If you're sitting there laughing, stop, because the movie's incredible. And you know, he wrote that a lot. It's really cool if you go watch that movie, which will surprise you, because those that you think are the protagonists are not. And things take a sideways turn in that movie, and it has some wonderful surprises for a campy horror film. It's a delight. And in that movie, there's actors, and they show up in the Shawshank Redemption, and they have shown up in many of Darabont's films. But this was his directorial debut. It's one of the greatest debuts. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't want to say it's like Orson Welles and Frank Darabont. Like, I'm not going there, but it is a really impressive debut. He not only translated Shawshank Redemption well, he later directs The Green Mile, and there's a lot of people that love that. I'm not as high on The Green Mile as I am on Shawshank Redemption, but I liked it.
It's just because Forrest Gump's in it.
That's true. It's true. All right, let's.
But before we jump, can I throw one more thing in there?
Please.
Okay, so when we're talking about his adaptation of the script, you have to look at a couple of choices he made that were off the chain brilliant. And I don't know if it was by accident or by design. You'd probably know this better than me. But one of them is, instead of having the 3 wardens that are in the novella, he distills it down to this evil baddie Norton.
Right.
You know, and that was brilliant, because then you have a pinpoint to focus your hate on. He keeps Hadley in it. Because in the novella, Hadley's not even there at the end to get arrested. He has a heart attack and leaves before Dufresne escapes. The cooked books idea, where where Norton takes his own life at that end, that amazing scene at the end. That never happens. He just gets arrested and gets taken away in the novella. I mean, that was
it's pretty crazy.
Talk about, you know, redemption. When he throws the rock through the poster. That wasn't in the book. It's just him tearing it down. I don't know. Oh, and the final scene. Are we going there?
Yeah.
That wasn't in there.
That's what's crazy.
The scene in Mexico, when they reunite, even though it's just those rolling in credits kind of thing. What a great choice. Because in the book, you're just left with Red finally, after he didn't have instructions like he did in the movie. He just finally, through searching and searching, found the box, and then he's like, will I ever see him again? You never know if they reconnect.
Right.
Whereas in the movie, you get that redemption.
So satisfying. It's one of the great satisfying conclusions to a film. I mean, the cast is jaw-droppingly stellar. It's one of the most perfectly cast films with loads of character actors. Obviously, you have Morgan Freeman playing Red. You have Tim Robbins playing Andy. For those of you that are like, wait, refresh me on all this. Andy is accused of the murder of his wife. He is convicted of murder. We're not sure he did it until much later in the film, which I love that tension. He is sent to Shawshank prison. It is supposed to be in Maine. They filmed this in Ohio. I couldn't tell the difference.
It feels like you're in the Deep South.
It has that vibe, doesn't it? It has that vibe. Clancy Brown is in the film as, of course, you would probably know him from Highlander, but he is a kind of a prison guard, like the chief prison guard.
The Bull.
Yeah, you have Bob Gunton is in it. You would recognize him. Amazing character actor. He plays the warden, Norton. William Sadler is Haywood. I mean, the list goes on and on. Mark Rolston's in it. He plays Boggs, I believe. He was the guy that keeps trying to rape Andy.
And that's another great choice. Boggs in it has one line in the novella, and they develop, and that really shows Andy's inner strength.
Yeah.
Oh, another great choice. I didn't even think of that till you said that.
It's great decision after great decision.
Tommy.
Yeah. Well, Tommy's an incredible character. Is he in the novella?
He is, but he just gets, when he has that information in the novella, he just gets shipped off to another prison, and that's how they get rid of him. Him getting killed, it just builds that tension and your hate of Norton even more so.
Yeah, and also it injects this war of hope and hopelessness.
It does.
It feels like
good point.
The hopelessness is going to win, like the darkness is going to win. It's incredible. And you have to adapt a novel into Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson his crew made great decisions too. Yeah. I know people out there would disagree with that, but I really think adapting that work is near impossible, and they did an amazing job. You just have to distill, you have to combine characters, you have to distill ideas down at times, but then expand others. And you have to constantly be making these decisions to fit typically within a 2 hour to 2 hour and 20-minute time frame. Yeah. And they do great work.
There's two other things I think. The what's his name? The old man Brooks.
Yeah, Brooks. James Whitmore plays
amazing
Brooks,
character again. Yeah. But when you're speaking to that death of hope idea, he gets out, he hangs himself. Yes. That whole scene where never happened in the novella. Wow. Again, an amazing choice. Yeah. He actually ended up in an old elderly care facility and died of old age, in the novella. So taking that and moving it there, I guess. And I guess the other big thing is when you think about the casting, I guess. Andy was in the novella this small, like nerdy, mousy-haired guy with glasses, and Red was an Irishman.
Yeah, it's so great. Which works in the script so great. I mean, just because I'm Irish. Why are you named Red? I'm Irish.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such
and an homage. And here's the thing. The screen, the script was written, it follows the story exactly to a T as far as the way it unfolds, but he made these great choices to change these little tiny things that just... The sum again, greater than the whole. Incredible. Yeah,
the casting, the chemistry between Robbins and Freeman it's one of the best pairings in a film of the last. This year is the, can't believe it, the 30th anniversary.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And there in the last 30 years, there's not many pairings and chemistry of two characters that works as well as this. A few years earlier, you have Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon and Thelma and Louise. Yeah. That's a great pairing. there's not many that reach those heights, and this is sort of the gold standard. But it's how those two characters not only interact with each other, but with everyone else in the cast. It is truly a beautifully acted film everywhere. Everyone is interesting. Everyone is memorable. And that's, for a cast this large, that's saying something. Like, it's really amazing. Like, you might not know the actors' names, but you're like, oh yeah, that guy. Like, that guy was memorable. You know, the mean prison guard, you know, or the violent rapist, you know, that keeps attacking Andy.
And it's in culture so much, like it's on TV all the time. And when it's on, whether you're flipping through because you have a purpose or not, you stop and you watch.
Yeah. Where is it at? Oh, it's here.
I remember this part.
I'll stick around for a few minutes till the commercial, or I'll keep watching.
Yeah, and then you end up watching the end. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you do. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna take a look at some of the memorable scenes and talk about why they work so well. We'll be right back. All right. So, man, there is a stack of memorable scenes from this movie. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about the great scenes of Shawshank Redemption, why this movie is such a great classic, but then, you know, blend it into the idea of the themes that seem to resonate with us as film goers, as the people that watch this movie over and over again. I'm just going to list a few of mine, and Jeff, feel free to jump in and say, well, what about this? Or I love this scene. But I want to start. I'm actually going to jump down on my list here, and I think probably one of the memorable scenes is pretty early, and it's the rooftop beer scene. If you guys remember, it's like Andy basically uses he was an accountant, a banker, and he uses his skills, his brilliance, really, to get favor from the guards. And by doing that, he helps the Clancy Brown's character to basically, Captain Hadley, to get money that he didn't think he was going to be able to get. And so he's able to get beer for everyone that's tarring this roof, which includes Red. And Andy doesn't partake in the beer, but he seems to have this deep, deep satisfaction that he made people happy. And there's just this moment there's like this hint of redemption in that moment of just watching the sunset, drinking a beer in an existence where they didn't think that could ever happen again. I love that scene. It's so memorable.
It may be one of the best scenes in the movie. And I don't know. Everything's a soundtrack in my head, and that's Bob Marley and the Wailers' Redemption song playing quietly in the background, because that speaks to freeing your mentality, even if your body is enslaved. And that's really what that moment is. I think he says it. I don't remember how it's said in the film, but basically, for a moment, we were just guys working hard, having a beer together, instead of being prisoners locked up. And it's just like that's, and again, again and again, is the theme in that movie.
Yeah, they found their humanity for a moment.
Yeah.
And they were able to experience being human.
Great way of putting it.
For the story, Red starts to accept Andy.
Yeah.
At that point, you were kind of like, is he? Like, he kind of likes him. He finds him intriguing. And I think for me, at least, and I think this was in the script, it was this way. I have no idea about the novella, but we're seeing a lot through Red's eyes. Yeah. And Morgan Freeman, obviously, is the narrator, which this is kind of the beginning of Morgan Freeman narrating everything. I took students, this was years ago, on a leadership seminar in the summer to Gettysburg. And Gettysburg, the National Battlefield Museum, is outstanding. And they have this really exceptional movie theater that plays about a 15 to 20 minute movie setting up. And it's Hollywood level production. And Morgan Freeman is the narrator. Yeah. And it's like I just wanted to go in the museum so I could just watch that movie again and again and again. But like, he narrates everything. But the narration in Shawshank, it's just so special. And so I rarely like narration. In fact, I was one of the ones when Blade Runner, when I saw Blade Runner with narration and then saw it without, I was like, give me without. But this works here. And you start to really see it working effectively in the scene on the roof.
It's hard to do because that when a novella or something is written, a book is written with so much internal dialogue, how do you do that without matching it up? And then a lot of time the dialogue gets too like dense and you don't enjoy it. This narration, because of him, in all honesty, is incredible. And I mean, even further, I think one of the reasons that they dropped the Rita Hayworth portion is because in the novella, when Andy asks for that poster, that's their first interaction and when they really become friends. And this scene, that beer scene, is really when they start to become friends, which is before he asked for posters and all that.
Yes.
They did kind of move that piece out chronologically, but it works.
It does.
Again,
it's a gateway scene to the relationships, to him being, Andy being accepted. That's a enjoyable, memorable scene. There's an earlier scene. It's not on my list, but it's Andy's first night in Shawshank. So he gets there. Everyone, when he gets to the prison yard and gets, brought in and sort of has his orientation, where he's like stripped and like sprayed and like walks butt naked through the prison. And everyone's yelling at him, the violent offenders. It's so. You're so vulnerable with Andy as he goes into that situation. And then one of the new inmates loses it and is beaten to death. And that sequence to start, it's right in the first 15 minutes. It is terrifying.
Traumatic,
It's traumatic. And again, you have this brilliant narration where Red says, Andy didn't make a noise. He was just quiet in his cell. Like there's this quiet strength about Andy that's established early on. So I love that sequence. What were some of the scenes that you love?
You have a few ones here that I think you can't get away from any of what you put in. They're fantastic. But the one also that kind of lends to this rounding out of the character is when Andy locks himself in with the thing, and it's
an incredible scene.
Whatever it is, La Noza de Figaro or de Figaro, when he's playing, and everyone is just laying there in their bunks listening.
Well, they're on the prison yard.
And the prison yard, they pause, and it's just like such a beautiful scene of, again, it's about, I think it's control.
Yes.
So he may not be, he knows he's going to get in trouble. He ends up getting put in the hole in solitary because of it, but it's worth it because
he sacrifices for all the inmates
and his physical freedom for his mental freedom.
Right. And there's just this joy as he's, he gets the record because he's bringing a library basically to the prison.
Leaning back in the chair, feet up. It's good.
It's great. And then that's where you start to see these concepts of hope in the midst of like darkness start to really take hold in the film. And that scene is super memorable. I would say Brooks, if you guys are trying to remember who Brooks is, he works in the library, kind of runs it, and Andy joins him. Brooks is older. He gets paroled. He has that crow, I think, that's with him all the time. And Brooks is released, and then, of course, he's so old and just
institutionalized.
He's institutionalized, which there's a lot about the movie about what happens to people that serve their time and get out. And just, again, hopelessness.
There's a little bit, I mean, not to get too political, but it's speaking out. I think King is also speaking out against how the institutionalization of inmates in America isn't something that's rehabilitative. Instead, it becomes its own world. And so the recidivism we see isn't just because of genetics or all these things. It's because it's getting beat into them and they can't get away from it. And I think that it's a beautiful commentary, even in this hopeless, because that's another one where the balance of the scale is this is on, despair instead of hope. But and you wonder, it's a great setup for Red when he gets out. Is he going to make it?
You're right.
Because then you're going, oh, no, we know what happened to Brooks. What's going to happen to Red?
Same room, everything. Again, it's the story structured so beautifully. And
which leads to that idea before he gets out of Red's parole hearing. And instead of him rationalizing his behavior, really being transparent and vulnerable, and we're there with him. It's like Andy walking in naked into the prison. It's Red bearing his soul to the parole board. It's a very big parallel there.
Yeah, and exits the prison.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's his way out.
Yes, and there is like, you know, there's all these conversations of like, I didn't do it, none of us did it. And Red goes, yeah, I did it. Like, you know, he's like, yeah, I'm the only guilty guy here in Shawshank. But
Great line. I forgot about that.
But, you know, he gets to that point, you know, and I think that's such a memorable moment. It's Red faces a parole board. I think it's his fourth time. And unlike previous ones, he just is just, you're right. He bears his soul and says, I regret it, you know, but I don't know what you want me to tell you, you know. But stamp your papers and let me go back to prison.
But it leaves the viewer or the reader in either case going, is this the effect that his friendship with Andy has had on him, where he can face it with bravery rather than doing that compartmentalization or justification? He can say, yeah, I'm messed up. I recognize that, and I can move forward because of the hope he's been given.
Right. There's something about prison films sort of deal with these same things. Like, if you think of of course there's some that are not, but like many of the prison films, that genre of film, there is this, how do I get out? Do I escape? How do I change? But there's this overcoming an obstacle that seems to be impossible to overcome. And I think that's why for, you know, the last 70, 80 years, audiences have been totally enamored with those types of concepts in film when it comes to like the prison film. It's like, how do we survive? How do we escape? But also there's this Shawshank, I think, is what's doing something a little bit different. There's like a escape in here in your heart.
How do we impel change rather than compel change? Because if it's an outside mechanism, then it's not tenable. But if it's coming from the inside, if you feel impelled to that change, then you're owning that change. And how do we get there? And I think that's with anything in life.
Right.
How do we lose weight? How do we become a better father or mother? How do we become a better friend? It has to come from the inside. And so, I mean, it's a universal argument, which makes this, what are the prisons that we have ourselves in?
Right.
Oh, it's so good.
There's so much going on. Yeah. This is why this is a classic, and Forrest Gump isn't. All right. Andy's escape and the revelation of the false wall, I kind of have those together, but for me, Andy's escape, what he does to get out, crawling through the sewage line to get out, and just him, you know, arms extended to the sky, to the heavens as the rain comes down on him. It is one of the most satisfying. When I saw it in the theater, I was on the edge of my seat. Like, I was like, is he going to be able to do this? Is he going to be able to get out? And of course, we knew at that point, but seeing the process of it. But I want to go back earlier because these two scenes are so connected. It's when the warden and the guards discover Andy has escaped, and it is sort of like such a pump your fist because you know the warden he's so mad, and Andy had been like polishing rocks into chess pieces, and the warden's so mad he's throwing them at the guards because he's like, where is Andy? Andy's just not in his cell. And then he throws one through, I think the poster's Raquel Welch at that point. It goes right through Raquel Welch, and there's a tunnel. And that scene, and then falling into like how he escaped, is just it's some of the best filmmaking in the 90s, I think. And it's that death and resurrection. Yeah, it is though.
As
it
he's
really is.
Beating the pipe with every thunderclap and fighting for his life, and then he is reborn out of the sewage.
Yes,
taking his first breath of freedom as he screams it's just rife with another, like we've talked about, Western overlay of that, you know, the idea of how Western culture cannot get away from, at least in the United States, Stephen King, even more so the underpinning is that idea of the Judeo-Christian ethic that has formed so much of what,
Right.
whether you believe or you don't,
Right,
it's
right.
inherent in the fabric of,
So much of the culture.
yeah, it's just incredible. And so there's that as well. You're just like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
So he is reborn. He is resurrected from that death of that prison. Such a cool scene.
It is, and it's structured so well too, because if you think back to Shawshank and how the movie flows, there's some moments that happen. It's when this new prisoner comes in who is a young guy that everyone you think they're not going to like, but they all like love. It's Tommy. Tommy shows up. Tommy is sort of just like he's hopping in and out of all these prisons, but he's not a violent offender. He's a thief, and yet he was put in with some violent offenders and finds out that Andy didn't kill him. It's this other guy that killed Andy's wife, and the man that his wife was having an affair with. I think you say like a golf pro or tennis pro. I can't remember.
Like that, yeah.
And so Tommy is going to reveal it all. Andy's shot to get out is about to happen. We're all ready for it, and then the warden, who is using Andy's talents as an accountant to basically commit fraud,
cook the books,
and make millions of dollars. The warden just can't allow this to happen, so Tommy's killed. And as you watch the film, the rug is pulled out from under you at that point, and Andy is thrown in the hole because he's trying to figure out, trying to say why, this is my chance, and finds out Tommy's dead, and just it seems like Andy has hit rock bottom, but Andy's determined in that you don't understand until retrospect. At the end, you're like, oh, Andy was like, I'm making my break now, and he makes his break in the storm. And but the way we don't know that until he's out.
There's a very M. Night Shyamalan esque feeling.
Yeah.
The same feeling again, like at the end of what's called Sixth Sense, when you're like, oh, wait a minute. He's dead. Oh, wait a minute. Andy had another plan. You're just kind of like, oh, so good.
Cinema's always done that, but the 90s have a lot of that going on.
They do.
They have a lot of these really interestingly structured stories that have some surprises, but it doesn't diminish the story itself. It's just great, clever surprises, and the way the story's structured.
Honestly, some do, because they're horribly done and you see it coming a mile away.
Yeah.
But when you have the conflagration of minds like this with King, and then the way this script was rewritten, it's just incredible.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. Just a couple other things about Shawshank that I love. One is the set itself was a real prison.
Yep.
Part of it doesn't exist anymore, but when they were filming it, the reason they got it and they landed this place in Ohio was they were going to demolish this prison, this old prison. And the filmmakers found it and they said, can you hold off on demolishing it and let us film here? And the interiors of the prison were in ruins, and so they had to remodel it. And if you see the actual prison cells themselves in the movie, that's actually in a warehouse that they built.
Oh.
So all the yard stuff, that's a real prison, but when you go inside, it's in a warehouse where they could control the light better and all that stuff. It looks so amazing. The prison is a character itself.
Yeah.
You really, there's several. They didn't have drones at that time, so they had to do these helicopter shots over the prison. There's one early in the film. There's one when they do the tarring of the roof. But those shots help us understand the geography of where the story is going to take place. It's brilliant filmmaking, but Shawshank, prison is a character too that's holding them in, and I love it for that. It's probably, there's some great prisons in movies, but it's probably one of the best, if not the best.
Yeah, and I think also there's something to be said for it almost being a part, like an innocent bystand. No, that's not what I'm looking for. But you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
Where in a lot of King stuff, when it has that that supernatural thing, the places are evil and out to get you. And in this case, it is clearly the people running the institution, and the institution itself, the buildings, all of that stuff are built to keep you in, but they're just, the hands outstretched of those people.
Right.
You don't get that same feeling. And so you almost come to, have a heart for the place.
Right.
Because you see these evil people running it, but then you see those broken characters that we get to engage with that you see the beauty in.
Yeah, it's interesting how those in power are so rotten. They're the villains. But one of the things Shawshank does so well is it has the warden, mainly the warden, the Clancy Brown's character, the guard, Hadley. He's sort of like an attack dog for the warden. I mean, although there are moments where he does his own beating people to death on his own, under his own cognition, but Norton's controlling him and controlling everything. And there's so many moments where Norton, as the warden, has basically used the prison guards as slave labor to do all these projects to make more money. He's really abusing these inmates in so many ways and making millions off of their backs. And he is such a great villain because when he meets his demise, he goes out so cowardly, but it's so satisfying that Andy got him.
Yep.
Andy won
Without putting a hand on him.
Yeah, without violence. He didn't do anything.
He outthought him.
Yeah, he did.
And what is this about? This is about the strength of will, the strength of the mind, and he does it all the way through.
Yeah. Let's talk about the end.
Okay.
So Red gets out. Red has a conversation with Andy before he gets paroled. And Andy basically says, if you do get out, Red, promise me. This is when Andy's at his lowest place. Promise me you'll go to this spot in the countryside. There's a rock wall. There's a rock there. Look under that rock. There's something there for you. Red does it. He tries to exist in the world for a little while, works at a grocery store, and then he's like, I'm going to go find this thing. Finds it. There's money, directions on how to find Andy. And then we go to the close of the film where Red and Andy are reunited on a beach where Andy's working on a boat, and it's one of the best reunions of characters. It's so emotional, and you don't want it to end. You want to revel in their own freedom and just sit with them, but it ends perfectly because your imagination kind of fills in all the gaps at the end. It's one of the most, for me, it's a perfect ending. How do you feel?
No, I would have to say, and again, that's why I say there are very few, but this is one where when I finished the novella, there was hope, and it was lovely because even in just leaving that box, you see Red spiraling down because he's been so institutionalized, and then he starts searching for it, and that search is what brings him out of that because it gives him hope. But then you get to see not only the process of that hope growing him, but you get to see the fruition of. I mean, they have to live as wanted men for the rest of their lives because he skipped his parole and Andy escaped from prison, but they're together, safe, happy, having bears on the roof with being physically as well as it's actually free.
It's such a great ending, and it's one of those films that when it ends, like you did when you saw it the first time, you're like, let's go see it.
We had to see it a second time, but we were just like, that was too much.
I remember walking out. I saw this by myself. I just went and saw it by myself, and I remember walking out and just thinking, I need to talk to somebody about this. But none of my friends had seen it. No one had gone to see it, so it wasn't until it was on videotape and then later on every cable, TBS, TNT, whatever, we're able to have those conversations.
But I think that, like I was saying at the very beginning of our chat, we watched it. We went out and we sat in the comfy chairs near the video games, and we must have talked about it for half an hour. What about this? What about that? Could you believe this? That was amazing. Let's go watch it again. Then we jumped in, but immediately you had to process it.
Right.
Because it makes you feel, number one, but then why did it make me feel? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's great stuff. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to do There Can Be Only One.
There can be only one.
All right, as we start to close out the episode, what is the single best thing about Shawshank Redemption? It could be a character, it could be a moment, a scene, a line, a theme, a song. It could be the music score, photography, whatever it is. What is the single best thing for you about Shawshank Redemption, Jeff?
I think that it may not seem like a huge thing, but I think that we touched on it earlier. I think the pairing and the casting of Andy and Red. I think you could have the best cast ever if those two characters were not the right people.
Right.
I think it wouldn't have had the impact it did. And I think that both of those characters, if you look at their body of work, accessibility is part of who they are, but together they were even greater. Like we're talking about with that relationship. You saw the friendship grow from almost contentious initially to they were standing on the beach together at the end, and it was like two brothers coming back together. And that's what I think we want in belonging. Yeah. And so you see this grow, and so that for me was the greatest part. Yeah. If there could be only one, it's that engagement of those two characters because of the actors that portrayed them. Yeah.
It's so hard to argue against that. I mean, the casting is so stellar in the chemistry of those two leads. I mean, for me, it's the full reveal of the escape. It's showing how Andy did it, how Andy and celebrating with him as he gets out. It's such a great, when you see the film for the first time and you're experiencing that moment. It's one of the best moments I've had in a theater ever. It was so uplifting and exciting and just like satisfying, and you're just like, you want to applaud, and you're like, this is a prison movie and I'm about to applaud when they like, we knew this guy was going to get out, like, you know, and yet
it had to happen,
you know, and
but
so
you're
good. Right,
because it's, I mean, we talked about him banging on the pipe with a rock, but even I think back to him tying his little package of belongings to his foot and pulling him away. Oh, just you're just cheering for him the whole way, and when you get that final reveal, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's the single best thing.
It's. I think there's so many people that are like, well, it's the last minute of the movie. Yeah. It's Andy and Red on the beach. Like, it's the best thing about it.
Arguably right.
You know, and that's why it's such a great movie. It's there's so many moments that you can just say, this is the best. No, this is the best. This is the best. Well, what do you guys think? Please, on the comments, we'll put this up on YouTube. And then, of course, patrons, thank you so much for supporting us. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can go over to patreon.com/living in the past, LIVININ the past. We have Patreon-only podcasts. We just did one on just the films of the 70s that people don't even know about. We just did one on a movie called Sorcerer, and we are going to be talking about another hidden gem from the 1970s in the next few weeks. And those shows are called What You Talking About. But just head on over there if you're interested in supporting the show. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back soon.